Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be playing MX vs. ATV Unleashed, and we're doing so to simply talk about where we have come from in motocross video games. Obviously, games in motocross have been around for a lot longer than a 2006 version of a game called MX vs. ATV Unleashed, which we're looking at here today. But there's so much talk made today about why are we so far off from this, basically. What happened that, we had a game that was pretty good like this, and it slowly got better to the point that we had maybe the best game ever released with MX vs. ATV Reflex in 2009, to then go almost backwards in some regard, as many people would put it, to some of the games that we have nowadays. And the reason why I specifically wanted to play this game today, for a little bit of a flashback Friday, is to talk about the fluidity of a rider on the motorcycle in a motocross video game, because a lot of people complain that all the new games, particularly the console games, but even the simulation games that we have now, the rider is way too stiff. Even MX bikes, where you have a lot of movement available to you to move the rider around on the bike in MX bikes, it still has like kind of a weird stiffness feeling to it, just because those motions are not always the most natural looking. And I'm not saying that MX vs. ATV Unleashed had the most natural looking movements on the bike, but one thing that I do feel they got so right about this game was the feeling, or the look, I should say, the aesthetic of when you have a hard hit or when you have a motion to the motorcycle, the bike kind of flows over the rider kind of flows over the bike more naturally. When you hit the whoops, the rider bounces. When you land hard off a jump like that, the rider kind of like bounces to the seat and then back up. When you lean into a corner, it leans down into the corner, then it kind of gets up on top of the bike a little bit. And it's always got this kind of like constant motion about it, where it's not stagnant. It doesn't sit like right on top of the bike like it has a stick in its butt. It actually moves around. And then, of course, there's so many tricks and other things that you could do as well. And really, it's just one of those things that we don't, why did we get so far away from this? So I wanted to briefly discuss that first, and then talk a little bit about how cool this game was, because for me, this was my childhood to a degree. There's a lot of people, this game's 16 years old now. There's a lot of people that may not have even been born when this game came out, but I was 13 when this game came out, maybe 14 actually. And so this was, I guess, my end of my childhood and into my teenage years, but I played the crap out of this game, a lot of Xbox Live with buddies and stuff like that. And it's a game that I still come back to regularly because it's available to play on Steam, for one, but it's arguably the best Unleashed, in my opinion. Between MX Unleashed and MX vs. ATV Unleashed, I think this one was better. Some people may disagree with that, but it was just such a good game. So, going back to this game, MX vs. ATV Unleashed, you have, at this point in time, Rainbow Studios developing the game. At this point, I believe they're called THQ Digital Studios West, excuse me. And they're based in Phoenix, which Rainbow Studios still is today. And it was, a team of guys that rode and knew how the game worked and all this stuff like that. And of course, then they went from this and developed MX vs. ATV Untamed, which is still a good game. But I think it maybe just took like one step back almost from a lot of things that they got right with this game. Content-wise, Untamed was arguably better than this game, maybe a little bit worse because you didn't have some of I think you didn't have monster trucks anymore, or planes or anything like that. But it was still a really, really fun game. And then from there, they took the step of going with terrain deformation. They took the step of the reflex stick when you land too hard from a jump. And they took the step of moving the entire model from one stick gameplay, which this is just me playing with one joystick, to two stick. You have the left joystick for kind of turning and just the movement of the bike, and the right joystick for movement of the rider, which is basically the synopsis that MX Bikes, the simulation game, is built off these days. Left stick is the bike, right stick is the rider. And they came out with the game MX vs. ATV Reflex, which everybody still rants and raves about to this day. We still play it quite a bit on this channel because people love it so much, and everyone's always asking, like, why can't we get Reflex too? The unfortunate turn of events after that happened was, and I've said this probably a billion times, they come out with MX vs. ATV Alive in 2011, and at this point in time, we're coming out of a recession with the economy, mainly in the U.S., but it impacted the world because of the housing market bubble collapsing. And THQ had been losing money hand over fist year after year and slowly slipped into bankruptcy, which then they filed for, I believe, Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2011 towards the end of the year. This is after MX vs. ATV Live came out. And so when THQ went away, everything's gone. All the employees that were a part of THQ, which of course was Rainbow Studios, they owned Rainbow Studios at that point in time, gone. They liquidated all their assets, all the coding for all these games that they created, boom, out the window, gone. And so everything that had been built to that point was pretty much gone. When they came back, they still had, I believe, some loose end code of MX vs. ATV Alive that they slowly turned into MX vs. ATV Supercross because THQ Nordic, THQ was bought by a company called Nordic GmbH in 2014. They reinstated MX vs. ATV Supercross to a degree, and then had MX vs. ATV Supercross Encore, I believe, in 2016. And they just were slowly trying to develop and make these games that were already there, but just didn't have much work done to them. And then, of course, they didn't have everybody on the same team come back. They had a few people come back from the original Rainbow Studios clan, but a lot of the people that that built Reflex and those games that you love were gone. So it's a different group of people there nowadays, and they started more or less from scratch to create MX vs. ATV All Out. And now they've slowly developed into MX vs. ATV Legends. But my point with all this is, why can't we have Reflex 2? Because it's not the same people. It's literally like a different company at this point, where so much of what was developed and made over the decade-long span that Rainbow Studios built up from, working on some games like the ATV Off-Road Fury franchise or Motocross Madness and other things like that, to this point with Unleashed, Untamed, and Reflex, which are all W's in my opinion, was gone. And so they started from scratch, and now you're seeing what that is developing into MX vs. ATV All Out, MX vs. ATV Legends. They're still working on the game. They're still trying to make it better, but it's going to be a long time, I think, before we get back to this, realm of development success, I think, to get a game that everyone unanimously agreed was good, which this in 2006 was a pretty unanimous agreement at this game is good, it's fun, it's easy to play, and people don't struggle with learning it because it's a different sport that they've never heard of, and things like that. So a lot of things that changed and happened really affected where motocross gaming was going. I think we'd be in a different place if THQ never went bankrupt, but unfortunately they did, and it's left us in this void. Now people are like, well, why don't they just copy the code or start over and do it again? And the same thing can be said about people at Milestone. Like, what are they doing wrong? Well, I mean, that's a different topic we could talk about all day, but the gist of it is, it's a completely different development cycle these days. They're working with different physics engines. They're working with different graphic models, a lot of different things that are different, and different employees, like I said, that don't have the same mindset or fortitude that they had before to make and develop games like this. So it's unfortunate the way it turned out. It's just the way the landscape has shaped. So in one way, it's a bummer that we lost all that. In another way, I still feel happy that something came out of it at all, because there was a year or two there where there was nothing. There was no console games. Nobody was developing anything, and we were just going to be in a never-ending void of no console games because there was only MX Simulator. MX Bikes was just getting started when THQ was bought by Nordic, and all these other pieces that were moving, but we just never got back to the same level that we were. So it's always a fun time for me to go back and look at these games and see where we came from, because yes, I do still love playing this game, and I think a lot of you guys out there could also enjoy playing this game just because of the fun value. It's a fun game. It's easy to learn. It's not that hard to pick up. It's hard to do well. Like, I remember some of the lobbies that I got into, some of the fast players were nuts and doing very unrealistic things, but that was the gist of it. Like, it was just so easily playable for the casuals, hard to get perfect, but a fun overall game with a lot of unique aspects, and at the bottom line of it, pretty good physics for the time. So that's a little bit of a history, a synopsis of everything that we've seen over the years with these MX vs. ATV video games. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you want to ask more questions or get involved in the comment section below, happy to discuss further. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.